The Games Room by Pauline Iris Kenya, Dugwi Junior Secondary School, Buteti District. Narrated by Katlego Masite, Maitlamo Junior Secondary School, Maun.
Onele quickened her pace as she walked along the deserted street. A cold wind had sprung up and she shivered, pulling her silky jersey tight and folding her arms over her chest. Just then, a vehicle pulled up next to her, surprising her. She had been preoccupied with what awaited her at home. The driver of the vehicle rolled down the window and said, "Hi babe, you want a lift? It's cold and you freeze out here in the streets." Onele considered the offer and decided to take the ride. Little did she know that it was the beginning of her misery. George drove towards the village center shops and parked his vehicle behind a local bar. In a kind voice, he asked Onele what her favorite drink was. Onele wasn't sure she had a favorite drink. After all, it was a long time since she had one. George stepped out of the car and went inside the bar. He told Onele not to talk to anyone while he was inside. He came back quickly and handed her an alcoholic drink. They both opened their cans and sipped silently. They talked a little about the weather, a bit on politics, just small talk that didn't seem to have any direction. The focus was mostly on the drinking and listening to the music spewing from the car speakers. Onele felt George's arm slide around her shoulder. She shuddered a little but then relaxed, because his touch was warm and comforting. After a little while, George shifted even closer. "I love you, Onele," George said, and Onele wondered if he was for real or it was just the influence of beer. She hesitated. If George liked her, maybe it would help her cope with what's happening at home, Onele thought. Her mother was unemployed and her 3 siblings were registered with the social welfare. "I love you too, George," she said, even though she didn't mean it. They kissed, sealing the agreement. The car had dark-tinted windows, so no one could see them from outside. George promised Onele that they would be happy in their relationship and they would eventually get married and have a wonderful life together. But Onele didn't know that George was married. After long minutes of kissing and fondling and touching, the two decided to leave the public space. The heat was building up and they needed a private space. They drove to George's place, a nice cozy house. Inside, Onele wasn't surprised when they went through the nicely furnished living room to the bedroom. But despite the alcohol that she had been consuming, her conscience nudged her, because she knew what going into the bedroom meant. Was she ready? Did she really want to do this? Wasn't this prostituting herself? How could she meet her man and go to bed with him right away before getting to know him first? But then she thought, no, George is genuine. I need money and he can help. Unlike the well-organized living room they had just walked through, the bedroom was a mess. It was like there had just been a war going on inside. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Empty beer cans and bottles littered the floor. Cigarette stubs and the distinct smell of marijuana. And amongst all the rubbish, to Onele's horror, were empty boxes and packets of used condoms. She hesitated, her heart jumping to her throat. The alcohol must have numbed the reaction of instincts in her. Because, had she been sober, Onele could have bolted away right then, screaming, "Mewe, Mewe!" But instead, she looked at George in horror. "Relax," George said in a slur. "What is this? What's going on?" she asked. "Welcome to my games room," he said. "Your what?" Onele was perplexed. For a minute, she thought maybe the beer was making her hallucinate and this wasn't real. "It's not a bedroom, darling. It's a games room. Are you ready to play?" "No," said Onele. "I have to go." "Listen, I told you I love you, right?" George reminded her, his voice heavy from the alcohol. "So trust me, we play this little game and you walk away with lots of money." "But you've been sleeping with lots of girls in here. Look at all these used condoms," Onele objected. They were only playing the game. "Look, I know your family suffers. I know everything about you. I'm offering help here. Now why can't you get undressed, climb on the bed, and we can get this over and done with. Onele thought about it. She really needed the money. Besides, the sight of used condoms was proof that George had been protecting himself. What harm would it do if she cooperated, got the money, and ran away? George, she could now tell, wasn't a man for keeps. And George asked impatiently. Onele started stripping. Slowly, George commanded. I want to revel in every move you make as you undress. If it wasn't for the beer she drank, Onele might have been embarrassed. In hindsight, she thought it was a great decision for them to drink first. She couldn't have stood any of these games if she'd been stone cold sober. The game was, as it turned out, a rough and violent sex session. The sheets slipped from the bed. Pillows flew across the room. George's strength was extraordinary, despite the alcohol. Onele had hoped that it would be over quickly, that maybe he would pass out. The game was long, too long for comfort. It wasn't anything that Onele could have wanted. Sex was supposed to be good, to be gentle, to be enjoyed. But George was a beast. He huffed and puffed like a buffalo. When it was finally over, she realized with numbing horror that George hadn't used a condom. George wrote Onele a check and handed it to her. The amount was good, but it wouldn't sustain her for long. It certainly wasn't worth the trouble and abuse she had just gone through. There was no goodbye, no when will I see you again. Clearly, George had lied when he promised a relationship with her. He had only wanted to entice her to his games room. 2 months later, she was pregnant. She sent George a text message, telling him she had missed her period and suspected she was pregnant. George responded, "Get an abortion, it was only a game." How many other girls had seen the inside of that wicked games room? How many lives had George ruined? How many illegitimate children did he have in the village? Who really was this guy George? Onele decided that George was a psycho of some sort. No normal person could harness an idea such as the games room.
Take-home message. Never let desperate circumstances lead you to compromise your values and decisions. There are support systems within the communities such as teachers and social workers. Transactional sex is against the law in Botswana. Therefore, it is a crime.